All right, we are now recording. Danny, I'd like to thank you very much for joining me today. For my students, I'd like you to please introduce yourself and then also answer the question when somebody asks you what you do, how do you respond?
All right. I'm Danny Wurst. Thank you very much for having me, Mike.
You're welcome. My pleasure.
And I am the Senior Community Director for San Diego for the website Yelp.
You said community director?
Yeah.
Okay, great. So could you just explain what that means? Like, what is a community director? And then it's probably unlikely that someone doesn't know what Yelp is, but what is Yelp also, in case they don't know?
Yeah, in case you don't know what Yelp is, it's a website where people find the best local businesses in whatever area that they're at. It's kind of a combination of a social media and Yellow Pages if you're looking for a restaurant or a doctor or really any sort of business. You can just search for it, and then you'll find feedback from actual users that have written reviews, posted photos, and just contributed content, so you get a really great idea of what the business is like.
Okay, cool. So then what does it mean to be a community director in that context?
So my job as a community director, it's a form of marketing, very event-based, but essentially I'm kind of taking the community that exists online of people that are writing reviews and interacting, sending each other compliments and messages. And I'm taking that experience and bringing it offline through events that I work out with local businesses and restaurants and all sorts of other stuff just in San Diego.
So
I should know as well that
sorry to interrupt.
I held this position in Chicago as well for a number of years.
So I was wondering if you could just like give like a concrete example of what an event might look like, or like what's the type of business that you work with, the type of people that you might invite to these.
Yeah, so the people that come to the events are the most active contributors to the site. They're called Yelp Elites. And when you become Yelp Elite, you get a little badge on your profile and you have access to this calendar that I am coordinating with all sorts of other local businesses. You get to come to these events and you get typically like complimentary experiences or discounts or free tickets to things going on. Events are really fun. You get to meet other people in person that you've just been sending messages with and reading their reviews and helping find local businesses and stuff. So it's kind of fun. You get to meet new friends and also connect with really awesome local businesses. So we do a lot of the events with restaurants and bars, but we really do them with all sorts of other local businesses in general. It just kind of depends on who wants to bring in the Yelp community to gain exposure through word of mouth.
Could you just sort of break down a little bit further, like what are the economics behind this? Like, why is Yelp hiring you to plan these events and to work with the community? Like, why? What's the purpose of this?
Yeah, so I guess you could kind of look at it as my role is like the gas in the tank of our company. It essentially is the product. So I am getting people to write reviews and to contribute this content so that there is a product to sell. We make our money through advertising to local businesses. And the reason we're able to do that is because there's so much great content. They know Yelp as a trusted resource to find a great restaurant or to find a doctor or to find whatever it is. So
we can see you.
Are you recording?
Yes.
I didn't know you were.
You don't have to crawl. You can just walk past.
I know, but are your kids watching this?
They're not live. They will watch it to say hi to my class.
Okay. Yeah. Why is he still awake?
I don't know, but you're ruining my interview.
Some would say it's enhanced, actually, but
yeah, enhanced. Sorry.
But yeah, so just to get back to it, I'm kind of my role is essentially the product, or it kind of fuels the product. It's Yelp is word of mouth. So it's my job is to get these people to be applying their word of mouth to our website, and that's how people find these great local businesses.
Very cool. I don't know if you know the answer to this, but maybe you can start off by saying how long have you been with Yelp? You probably know that.
Yeah,
So-
I've been with the company for a little over 11 years now. So
So I imagine in that decade plus, the company has changed a fair amount. Would you say that they were still kind of a startup back in the 2010 era when you joined them, or were they more established at that point?
I'd say it felt like a startup for sure. I believe I was like around employee number 300 or so. So pretty early on in the game.
Do you know how many employees they have now? Approximately.
Well, approximately like 3,000. We did, because of the COVID crisis, we unfortunately had to lay off a bunch of people and furlough a bunch. So right now we're at about 3,000. But before that, it was like 5,000. We hope to bring back, once things normalize a little bit. I know we really hope to bring back a lot of those employees. Sure. But yeah, I was pretty early in the game, around like 300, I would say. And it definitely felt like a startup. It was, it was scrappy, lots of ideas being thrown around, just tons of energy. And then, as things develop, there's just a lot more boxes and things that you have to check, I's you have to dot and T's you have to cross.
Could you sort of explain maybe what some of the differences are now that the company is more established, versus the startup days? I imagine you probably wore more hats in the early days than maybe you do right now, or maybe that's not the case.
Yeah, I would say there's definitely some of that. Earlier on, you do have a little bit more flexibility and room to kind of, take your ideas and just apply them. Now, since we are established, with any other company, once you're pretty big, you have so much to protect. So it's like, if I have an idea, it just has to go through a couple of different levels of someone making sure that we can do it. So we don't put the company in any potential danger of being sued, or
a few more layers of risk reward analysis, perhaps.
Yeah,
something like that.
Exactly.
Very cool. Now, is there a reason that you chose or sought out to work at Yelp versus maybe is there a reason that you tried to work in like the startup space versus a more established company? Was there something that drew you to that type of work environment?
I mean, my story is kind of just by chance. I was working in hotels before, so with really big companies like Starwood Hotels and Hilton Hotels, and I actually found Yelp. I was a concierge at a hotel at the time, so I was utilizing it a lot to tell people where to go to a restaurant or what sites to see, things like that. And so I really kind of just fell into it as a user, and I thought it was a really awesome tool. Researched a little bit more about it, and from there, I just kind of saw a job posting online and thought, I'm going to go for this, even though at the time what they were asking for, I was on paper probably a little bit underqualified from what they did, but I just wrote a really creative cover letter, and I took a shot in the dark, and the cover letter really got their attention. They called me in, and from there, the rest is history. So
one thing that I like to talk about with my students is that if you're trying to break into an industry, one way to get more experience than you maybe otherwise have the experience to do is to go to a startup company, because they might not be able to get on paper top experienced talent, but they can get young people who are eager to sort of cut their teeth and improve their worth. It sounds like that's sort of what ended up happening with your career to a certain extent.
Yeah, and I mean, I think some advice that I could give, what I had learned, and I think what really helped me to get this job that I may not have been exactly what they were looking for at the time is I knew the product. So I really liked it. I was using it. I just demonstrated that I had a massive knowledge for it and that I was really excited about it. And I think that really goes a long way for startups is the passion that you have for their product. If you can really, show people that you can get behind their mission, then they're really receptive to that, and they'll be likely to bring you on board.
Now, you had mentioned something about your cover letter. Is there some aspect of that you can share, or is it just specific to that time that there isn't much of a story?
Yeah, I can kind of share it. It's actually been shared in our department a couple of times as just like an example of creativity or uniqueness. One of our core company values is being unboring, and it's kind of used as like a example of being unboring. But I wrote a cover letter that was a script of what it would be like to have a phone interview with me. And then, so I answered in the script, I answered the questions with like very professional answers, what you normally would at an interview. But then in the script, there was a bubble that would come up from my head. And, the bubble that would come up in my head was kind of more, I guess, partying or more like what would fit like for a funny movie script, like an Adam Sandler scrict.
Now, did you format it? Did you format it like, Courier new font and like the whole like, official?
Oh, it was a script. Yeah. That's actually that's what I went to school for is media studies and kind of like script writing and stuff. So I kind of took like something that I really enjoy as a passion, and I still do today. And I just, applied that to my application.
So there's two threads that I want to chase down there. First off, could you talk a little bit more about media studies? Where did you go to school? What type of student were you? And what'd you do during your undergrad?
I went to school at a small college in Dubuque, Iowa called Loris College. I had a great experience there. It was actually probably smaller altogether than the school that you teach at. I think they had like 2,000 people in the whole entire school.
Oh, wow.
But just the way I kind of learned, I think that was the choice for me. It was, really small class sizes, lots of like group work and being able to interact with other students and collaborating and stuff. Media studies, I don't want to say it was like a film major because it covered a bunch of like different areas. There were a lot of classes that were TV and video production, but there was also radio, like script writing, a lot of stuff like that. So it was like an all-encompassing like journalism type of major. I also have a major in PR, public relations. And I think that really comes in handy with what I do since I pitch media so much. And I'm a local spokesperson for Yelp. So public relations and any type of communication was really useful for what I do for work now.
Very cool. So one of the things that I talked to you about before the interview started is that our students are pursuing side hustles as we find ourselves in quarantine, and the businesses that they had started sort of logistically make it challenging to work on. I was wondering if you have any side hustles of your own that you could share with the students, in addition to Yelp.
Yeah, really interesting that you asked this question and use that word. My side hustle of lately is my brother owns a production company, and I work with him a lot just on creating advertising campaigns. So right now we're working with a couple of alcohol brands and creating like little Instagram ad campaigns for them. So I do a bunch of script writing. I'll do some line producing. And
can you explain what line producing is?
Line producing is just like kind of coordinating a shoot, everything that is involved with like a film shoot. So it is coordinating the camera, coordinating the lights, coordinating the talent, just bringing everything together and making sure it kind of like runs on a schedule. A line producer is typically there on the day that everyone is shooting, but a lot of work is just kind of done behind the scenes. So, but so that's the side hustle I'm focused on mostly right now. One of the projects that we're working on within the production company, though, is a pilot for a show that we're actually pitching to like Netflix and Quibi and a couple other of the streaming services. But the title of the show is actually called Side Hustle, and it focuses on like business owners or like popular personalities and what they do, but not necessarily what they do, but their side hustle. So one example is there's a sandwich shop in Chicago, a place called Nini's Deli. And that is the person that we're featuring's kind of main gig that he does. But the story is being told about his side hustle, which is he also has this really popular clothing brand called Chicago Native. May have heard of it, but like Derrick Rose and like all sorts of Chicago rappers and stuff. Chance the Rapper has like worn his clothing and stuff. So it's kind of a story about that, like a celebrity or a business owner or someone kind of known within communities and what they do when what they do on the side.
And it's documentary style, not a fictitious like sitcom or something like that. Right?
Yeah, it's documentary style.
Very cool. So that's sort of interesting because I think a lot of times in our class specifically, we look at, business case studies of like tech startups, but there's this whole other, realm of like creative media. I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about what it would look like, if this were to go. Like, so what are you working on right now that you are going to then pitch to Netflix and Quibi and some of these other streaming services?
We're just kind of developing the story right now. So we've actually worked on a couple of other projects with this guy before, and he's really interesting. He has like some really cool stories. So we're kind of taking the footage that we already have and really carving out exactly what the story is, and then developing some other stories for the future around some other personalities. So one other option that we're looking at is an actor, the guy who played Aladdin in the recent remake. So he's an actor, but he has this side hustle as a vegetarian cookbook writer. So right now we're just kind of developing these stories and figuring out exactly what we have and how we want these stories to take shape. Then from there, once they take shape, it's just about shopping them to whoever will potentially buy it. So
could you actually talk about like that process? It's like when you put something together, is it a full length episode? Is it a preview? Is it, and then once you have that thing, whatever that thing is, like who are you showing? How do you shop, the idea for a show?
Well, this is my first time doing it actually. So I can't speak from personal experience going through the process and actually doing it, but the idea typically is you shoot like a little pilot or like a small like sample of it, something that you don't have to put a ton of money into, but you can show
enough to give a flavor for what it will be.
Yeah, you show like a proof of concept, like you would any other business idea or startup, and then
so sort of it's the media studies equivalent of a minimum viable product, coming from the startup space.
Exactly, it's a very great analogy.
Okay.
Yeah, that's pretty similar to how it works.
And then so like who's at Netflix that you go talk to? Who at Quibi? Like how do you get a foot in the door, or at least theoretically, how does that work?
I am not extremely familiar with this process. Like I said, it's just kind of something I'm learning as I go. My brother, he works with a lot of creative directors and people in the industry. So he's kind of like taking on that side of what this project will be. I probably wouldn't be the best person to speak about it because I don't have any like specific experience, but we're just finding the right person there. I'm sure they have scouts that are always looking for different things to green light. So
I think that in of itself is sort of like a good meta lesson, is that if you are interested in some endeavor, you don't necessarily have to do every single thing yourself. You can find the strategic partners to work with who can take care of that aspect of the heavy lifting.
Oh, absolutely. That's one of my best strategies, is just to put experts around me when I don't know exactly what it is that I'm doing. That's the best way to succeed, is not to try to do something that you're not good at, but to bring in someone who is really good at it.
Very cool. Well, I don't want to take too much more of your time, so I'm going to ask sort of like one more final, wrap up question, and that is, if a young person was interested in entering your primary domain of like community management or marketing and PR, what advice would you give to them?
I think some good advice that I've given in the past is, like, don't let your schooling or your previous work experience hold you back from going for something. You can kind of take my story as an example of that. Like, I wasn't exactly what they were looking for on paper, but I didn't care. I just, did something to make myself stand out. And I think that's really important, specifically with startups or companies at an early stage. Like I said, is just showing them that you can really think outside of the box and that you can be versatile. Those are the most important types of employees that companies at an early stage, I think, are looking for. A lot of the stuff they can teach you, like what they want you to do, but you can't really be taught to think outside of the box or think differently. So just don't, because you have a certain major or something and you see a listing that you think would be cool, don't dismiss it just because it's not exactly like what your background is in.
Great.
I think that that's some good advice.
Great. All right. Well, thank you very much, Danny, for joining our class today. And
thanks for having me.
Hope you guys stay well in San Diego. I imagine it's probably a little bit nicer outside than it is here in the Chicagoland area.
It's pretty nice here, but I miss Chicago.
Well, we miss you guys too, and I hope to see you soon.
All right. Thanks, Mike.
All right. See you, Danny.